千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Laozi. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. So now, without further ado, let's get back into Tao Te Ching 21. As a recap, last time we went through the chapter title, translated as Follow the Tao. As usual, the chapter title is consisting of 3 characters. The character on the right, the last character, is simply the character for chapter. So the first 2 characters carry the meaning of the title. The first character, the one to the left, is to follow. And the character in the middle should be a familiar character looking exactly like the character that you see in the upper right-hand corner. That is the character for the Tao. To follow the Tao is to walk the path, to live a fulfilling and harmonious life. The Tao is not just a path, it is the path, the best path, one that leads to a state of natural ease and well-being. Last time, we looked at the whole chapter and we did our sectional analysis as usual. We were able to divide it up into 3 sections. As you can see, section 1, lines 1 to 4, is basically 2 sets of 2 lines each. Hence, you'll see them arranged in the ABAB structure. And the repeating characters highlighted in red will help you see that. We also identified the repeating characters in section 2, which goes from line 5 to line 12. Quite a few repeating characters there, and they are marked in red in different ways to help identify them. So from 5 to 12, they also follow the ABAB poetic pattern. And here's a way to make that easier to see. And we were able to cover most of the first section, and we're about to get into section 2 for today. Section 3, the concluding section, goes from 13 down to 17, and it is one of those passages that is simple on the surface and yet profound beneath the surface. So we will explore all that, but now a quick recap on the first 4 lines that we went through last time. So previously, we began with lines 1 and 2. In these 2 lines, Laozi was referring to the wise sages before his time who demonstrated great virtues. This is similar to what he had talked about in previous chapters. The masters of antiquity, those who were good at living life, the sages of the past. These were all people before his time, because the Tao was very ancient. So all of these wise sages before his time, every one of them followed only the Tao. So we wanted to also talk about what was this Tao that they followed. So we went into lines 3 and 4. This is where Lao Tzu begins explaining the Tao, something that cannot be perceived with an abstract nature that people could not readily understand. Lao Tzu acknowledges the uncertainty, the lack of clarity. Since the beginning of the Tao concept, all the sages, including Lao Tzu himself, were very clear that the Tao was not a personified deity. This was a radical idea in ancient times because people were much more used to, much more accustomed to deities. This could be a major obstacle for widespread understanding of the Tao. And previously, last time, we looked at a slide that showed the differences between the conventional ideas about deity worship versus the path paradigm in the Tao. And this is where we ended our discussion last time. The purpose of this slide is to illustrate the point made by Lao Tzu about the Tao being unclear and indistinct. So the Tao is not a physical thing and therefore cannot be perceived by our physical senses. And when we talk about indistinct and unclear, it is true in another sense. The Tao was not the familiar setup of religious practices and deities worship. It could not be easily understood by many people. So then, it was not a big surprise that they would find the Tao to be unclear. So with this slide, we wanted to show the differences between the two different approaches to the spiritual side of life. And beyond this point, for our discussion today, Lao Tzu will talk about key aspects of the Tao. For that discussion coming right up, I think it will be a good idea for us to have an overall mental image, a framework that can really help us follow the points that Lao Tzu will make. Let me present the illustration. We begin with a graphical depiction of a person to the left. This represents you. Now, there are many aspects of you in all your complexity as a human being. But for the purpose of this slide, I want to highlight 3 aspects in particular. And here they are. Your senses, what I mean by that is your physical perceptions. What you can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. Your senses, physical perception, your senses are engaged right now as you look at this slide and hear the sound of my voice. there is also your mind, your mental functions, how you think, how you analyze, compare and contrast, make decisions. Just like your senses, your mind is engaged right now as you consider my words in order to understand what I'm trying to say. I also have your heart that is distinct from the rational faculties, as in your emotions, how you feel, how you react, like or dislike, how you resonate with the truth that you cannot put into words, but definitely will recognize as soon as you hear it. So the bottom line is that the things we cannot perceive clearly or directly using the physical senses, like the imperceptible Tao, we can engage the mind, rationality, and the heart, the intuitive grasp, to figure stuff out for ourselves. By using these capabilities that we have, we can end up with a high degree of confidence and certainty, even for things we cannot quite see. But let's stick to the things that we can see first. What would that be? It is the world, which the ancients were called 天地, where 天 is heaven, 地 is the earth, heaven and earth, the world. So in this illustration, 天地 in the middle represents what we can perceive with our senses. So your senses are interacting with the environment. We look around in this world with our eyes. We listen for sounds with our ears, and so on. Of course, the expression heaven and earth used by the ancients represented what they knew. In modern times, we can add more scientific knowledge to the expression. We know heaven is not just the sky, the clouds, the sun, the moon, and the stars. These were the things that the ancients could see. Today, we also know about other planets in our solar system, other planetary systems many light years away. We know about our own Milky Way galaxy, as well as billions of other galaxies in the unimaginably vast cosmos. All of these and more are within the scope of existence. But now, I would like to bring our focus back into this world, this planet that we're on. There are many aspects to it in all its complexity as a world. But for the purpose of this slide, I want to highlight 3 aspects in particular. First, we have nature. This term, nature, is inclusive of everything in the universe. Here in this context, I'm specifically referring to the great outdoors. In other words, the biosphere of the earth, where life can thrive. So that's not the only thing that we can see in this world. We can also perceive the myriad things, the living creatures, all living things, inclusive of all plants and animals. That's one of the 2 ways that the ancients used this term to describe. all living things. The other way that they used this term was simply all things, living as well as non-living. And let me just point out that in life, many things that we see, many objects that we would categorize as non-living, it's not an animal, it's not a plant, these things used to be living things. So, easy example, furniture used to be trees. And it's the same with paper as well. It's actually kind of hard to look around to find things that are non-living today that did not used to be some sort of a living thing. Now, in the context of this illustration, we'll use everything in that broader context. So, other than nature and the myriad of things living in nature, what else can we perceive? Well, we also perceive, interact with people. People are part of the myriad of things, just as the myriad of things are part of nature. Human beings, of course, are categorized within the animal kingdom. We're animals, in addition to being human. The Western paradigm speaks to man's dominion over nature. On the other hand, the Tao paradigm speaks to how we are and have always been embedded in nature. So the two are not exactly the same. I will say that you and I have never been, will never be apart from nature. We're all part of it. And when we talk about people, what we perceive, we should also mention that there's also people in large numbers because humans form groups, communities, organizations, societies, civilizations. All of these we can perceive with our physical senses. Then I want to also cover the imperceptible. So beyond the perceptible, the middle part of this slide, we have the Tao to the right. In this illustration, the Tao represents the spiritual, the metaphysical, the divine, that which is behind the scenes of the physical world in the middle, that which acts as the laws that govern nature, orchestrating everything in the universe. So I want to also point out, for the middle part, I talked about how nature includes the myriad things. You know, the plants and animals that we see out in nature, they're all part of nature. And then the myriad of things include human beings. We're living things as well. So going from that scheme, when we talk about the Tao, it's not just the imperceptible. The Tao is everything. So the Tao includes not only the spiritual realm to the right, but also the physical universe in the middle. So in terms of this, the illustration is laid out in this particular way because we can interact with and perceive the material plane directly, but we cannot look beyond that to the right. We easily perceive the material world, but then we can't really see the ultimate force. principle or intelligence that operates in an unseen fashion, oftentimes unnoticed, beneath the surface level of reality. Our vision extends to the world, but that's about it. Another example to illustrate that may be that if you deal with a genuine spiritual medium, that person with the ability will be someone who can see further into the spiritual realm, beyond what most of us can see. Now, even though you and I cannot see into the spiritual realm, we can sense that there's something more than the physical. Lao Tzu describes the spiritual realm as indistinct and unclear. People all through history have made attempts to come to grips with it. In that perspective, we can see how religious practices fit into this picture. Religions exist in the world, the middle part, the middle column, and it is specifically inside the people box, which is the lowest box there. They represent ways to understand and deal with the spiritual realm to the right. They are attempts to bring the indistinct and unclear to the well-defined and clear world so that more people can connect to and be in touch with the divine. So this is the illustrative framework that will be the host to our discussion as we continue on exploring what Lao Tzu talks about when it comes to the Tao. So back to the Tao Te Ching itself. We're now on line 5, translated as so unclear, so indistinct. And I also want to bring line 7 to your attention, translated as so indistinct, so unclear. So the two lines are almost the same, except that the second and fourth, the last character, are switched in place. So line 5 and 7 are similar, second and fourth characters switched. And that is why they're translated in that specific way. The translation is also changing around to match. So the translation, as I said, reflects the difference in the order of the characters. They are reiterations. Indistinct and unclear have been reiterated in order to emphasize their importance. Indistinct because the Tao has no shape, no form, no boundaries or dimensions. The Tao is unclear because it is not clearly defined, nor is it completely understood. So the Tao, in my opinion, is more profound than people realize, so that the essence of the Tao, even though we say it's simple, the Tao itself is far from simple-minded. And when I say it is not clearly understood, that lack of understanding is manifested in different ways. For instance, I would say the Tao is not exactly like popular perception. The majority of wise-sounding quotes from Lao Tzu shared on the internet are not actually from Lao Tzu at all. The Tao principles and teachings are not necessarily the kind of common sense, intuitive type of wisdom that people assume. some of the teachings can seem counterintuitive at first. But then, of course, as we have seen many times, when you dig into it, the more we learn, the more these ideas, counterintuitive at first, begin to make sense. Next, let me cover this character that you see here, repeated many times. In line 5, twice, and also twice in line 7. This is the character xi. It is one of the characters in ancient Chinese, classical Chinese, that was used as punctuation. So ancient Chinese had no concept of punctuation as symbols. Instead, they used specific characters like this one and many others to represent different parts of speech, whether it's a pause, an exclamation, a question, and so on. In this particular case, xi, it is an exclamation, it is for emphasis, it is closest to ah or oh, that kind of exclamation. And why does Lao Tzu exclaim about the Tao? Well, he has studied the Tao for decades, and he came to the realization that the Tao had no limits. So it is in wonder and awe, this sense of amazement, that he says, ah, or oh. It is so incredibly unclear, so incredibly indistinct, and he could not help but exclaim in wonder. Now, after all that time, the central mystery of the Tao still remained. So those who did not know the Tao might assume that after you study it for a while, things will begin to clarify. But then Lao Tzu realized the more he learned, the more he discovered. So the Tao would always remain indistinct and unclear in its core. It is the same thing that you and I will discover as well. The more we learn, the more we're going to discover. So in the next line, it says, within it, there is image. It is referring to the Tao. Within the Tao, there is image. In this context, image refers to the reflected patterns of the Tao. What patterns? Well, here's the thing. Although you and I cannot see the Tao itself, we can perceive the patterns that manifest. So one prominent pattern is the circle. The circle is found everywhere in nature. The circle of life, the circle of living and dying, aging. Also, the interactions that we have with other people, those interactions manifest in a circular fashion as well in terms of karmic interactions. And we repeat sometimes life patterns without becoming aware of it. So patterns are literally everywhere. There's also patterns associated with our literature and entertainment. There's the hero's journey pattern. In 1949, Joseph Campbell wrote about narrative patterns found in myths and legends all over the world. This was true even in isolated tribes of humanity that did not have contact with the outside world. This pattern is one that is imprinted deeply in the consciousness of humanity. It's part of the Tao for us. In the hero's journey pattern, it would always begin with a call to adventure. And initially, there is the refusal from the hero or the protagonist. But then the pattern after that is that the protagonist is forced to answer the call. You are the hero of your own adventure. Your journey is one of many within the overall context of life journeys in general. So, it's just yet another example of the many patterns that we find in life. When we talk about these circular patterns, especially when it comes to karma, the idea is that the energies we give to the world return to us with amplified strength. Positive energy going out comes back as a goodness, often from an unexpected direction. Negative energy is no different. Even if no one knows you've done a bad thing, that energy will still come back to haunt you. So I want to delve into this idea, karmic energies, circular patterns. Previously, we talked about samsara, the wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. In the Tao, the patterns are reflective in all levels of reality. Therefore, when it comes to samsara, the cycles of samsara are also reflected in the cyclical functions of karma within a lifetime. And when you think about it, we see chronological cycles of the calendar as well. Cycles of weekdays, from Sunday to Saturday and back again. Days of the month, from the first day to the last day. The lunar calendar, the cycle is based on phases of the moon. New moon to the full moon and back again. In a decade, you cycle from the first year to the last year of the decade and then back to the first year of the next decade. So these chronologically repeating patterns can be mapped as well to centuries and millennia, 100 and 1,000 years respectively. What I want to do though is to zoom in not on a calendar construct, but on a lifetime to see the cycling in terms of life events. So here is an abstract depiction of samsara. This is the illustration, a simplified depiction of samsara as the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. One cycle represents one lifetime. So what we see here, this overall circle, this is a snapshot of somebody's life, showing its states at a particular moment in time. Within the overall cycle, there are smaller cycles. You can see it depicted here. Each one of the smaller circles represents a circular exchange of karmic energy in a significant life event. Let's go through them so you can see what I mean. This particular lifetime, like all lifetimes, begins with birth. From the perspective of samsara, the birth is actually rebirth, because all of this has happened before and will happen again. One goes from birth to infancy and then to childhood. Somewhere along the way, you have made a friend for the first time in this cycle. It is easy to see the circular karmic nature of this. You extend friendship to someone, and you receive friendship in return. Full circle. You transition from childhood to your teens. Somewhere along the way, you have learned important lessons as a young person. These lessons are also karmic in nature. For example, a negative experience may teach you what it feels like to be on the receiving end of bullying. Just one example. You transition from the teens to young adulthood, entering society. Somewhere along the way, you work through many challenges. So these challenges, you can also tell that karma is embedded in at least some of them. In one particular challenge, you may be able to see the cause and effect. That is, something you did in the past planted the seeds, good or bad, affecting your present. At some point in this life, you bond with another soul and begin building your life together, starting a family. And when a crisis occurs, you weather the storm together with your partner. Now, crises in general are opportunities to see karma in action. For instance, people may come to your aid in a crisis because of the help you provided to them in the past. So then, the years go by, you transition to middle age. By this point, you have gained sufficient experience about the way life works. To some extent, you can leverage that understanding to help you achieve success. Achievements tend to be karmic in nature as well. You realize collaborative efforts are karmic to the core. You help me, I help you. Eventually, you transition to old age. You are aware of your own mortality, and you know there aren't that many days left. Your time in this world is limited. Perhaps you decide you want to have closure before leaving this particular cycle. Perhaps you reach out to old enemies to address old grievances. You bring forgiveness and goodwill, and you are amply rewarded in receiving the same in return. Reconciliation. So, with a brief sketch of a lifetime, you can see circles within the larger circle, one cycle of samsara containing many circular transactions in terms of karma. So this is what I mean by the patterns of life reflected and perceptible in the Tao. We cannot see the Tao itself, but we can see the patterns that are manifested in reality. And in the Tao, there are prominent patterns that are all built upon the powers of two. I break it down into two categories, the most well-known and the less well-known. The well-known ones, I think we're all very familiar with. There's the yin and yang, which is duality, the two halves. And then there's Bagua. Bagua may be less familiar to some. It is the 8 trigrams, and you can see that in this illustration to the right. Surrounding the two halves of the yin and yang symbol, you see the 8 trigrams arrayed around it. And what about the symbols below that? Those are the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. So these, I think, are well known to many. So what about the less well known? We previously have talked about Wu Ji. That's the state of nothingness, the void, zero. There's Taiji, the supreme oneness. Going from Wuji to Taiji is to go from nothing to something, from 0 to 1. And this is before differentiation and polarization that gave rise to the two of the yin and yang. Then there is also the less known 4 manifestations, 四象. It is between yin and yang, 2, and Bagua, 8. It is actually something that we notice as manifestations of reality. The 4 cardinal directions, north, south, east, west. 4 of them, the 4 manifestations. The typical compass will also show northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest for 8, evenly separated by 45 degrees. But back to 4. We also have the 4 seasons, and they go through cycles of seasonal change, so it is reflective of the circular pattern as well. So with these images in mind, the circle as well as the 2, the 4, the 8, the 64, etc., we can add something here to this diagram. We are using our senses to observe the cycles of nature, the seasonal changes, the chronological cycles like days, weeks, months, years, and so on. Then we use our mind, the reasoning ability, to deduce the circle as a primary pattern of the Tao. We depict its image in the circular symbol of the yin and yang. And we also see the complementary duality in the two halves of the symbol, in that day turns into night, back into day, and so on. We use our senses to observe the myriad things from birth to death, generation after generation. We look at ecology and ecological balance. For instance, dead animals, the carcass becoming nutrients for plants. Plants in turn providing animals with fruits as sustenance, and so on. Then, tapping into the mind again, we see the circle manifesting, but in a different way. we see additional manifestations of the complementary duality among the myriad things. For instance, male and female, parent and child, predator and prey, and so on. And finally, we use our senses to observe people, other people, and we also use our senses to observe our own lives. As we have seen, the wheel of samsara, circular paths of karmic energy exchange, these are all ways to manifest the great circle of the Tao. Among human beings, in human society, there are more intricate patterns, more interplays of karmic forces that have different characteristics. So this is why the ancients devised the Bagua, the 8 trigrams, as well as the I Ching with the 64 hexagrams. Each one of the 64 hexagrams in the I Ching depicts a different life pattern. All 64 are derived from observations of the world, the patterns of existence themselves. And that is why people who have used I Ching for divination, they talk about its uncanny degree of accuracy. For this slide, we can bring all of the above together to say that within the Tao, there is image. In other words, patterns. We're now on lines 7 and 8. So indistinct, so unclear. Within it, there is substance. So we've gone from image now to substance. These 2 lines about the Tao correspond to the following from the Qing. The great Tao has no name. It constantly nurtures all living things. So there are 2 parts to this that correspond to the 2 lines. Let me talk about them sequentially. For the first part, the great Tao has no name corresponds to so indistinct, so unclear. What this says is that Tao is only a convenient label of the imperceptible. It cannot be perceived clearly. That's what it says in the Tao Te Ching. And we do not know its name. So the other direction is also true. The Tao is a nameless enigma and therefore cannot be perceived clearly. So we can summarize as follows. The Tao is not so much a physical thing as it is a concept. More than just a concept in the mind. The Tao is the overarching principle of existence or the ultimate law of nature. It doesn't have a name. The Tao is eternal and existed before any names. Names are, after all, a human invention. The Tao was around long before human beings existed in this universe. And now, the second part. The line that says, it constantly nurtures all living things, corresponds to within it, there is substance. the Tao gives rise to and raises all living things. It is the metaphysical mother, progenitor, as well as provider. It is the ancestral source for all living things, including humanity. That's what it says in the Tao Te Ching. And as it says in the Qing, it is the provider. It nurtures all living things. More information on the Qing, this passage, and all other passages from the Qing can be found in the Tao of Antiquity, the Tao of Tranquility, pardon me. Line 8. Within it, there is substance. Within the indistinct and unclear Tao, we can glimpse living things because the Tao is the source of life. Life emerges wherever conditions permit, even in extreme environments such as hydrothermal vents, acidic pools, high radiation zones. This suggests the proliferation of life is the way of the universe. The way is, of course, the Tao. Indeed, abiogenesis experiments demonstrate life from non-life. The Earth itself is about 4.5 billion years old. Before that time, there was only dust and gas around the sun. So everything in our world today existed as that back in those days. All living things that we see now existed only as potential waiting for the right time to manifest into reality. And that is inclusive of non-living things as well. It is everything. So material things in the sense that everything comes from nothing. Everything we see on Earth did not exist 5 billion years ago. So think about a particle that used to be dust in interstellar space. At some point, it, through a process of gravity and accretion, formed a planet and perhaps becomes diamond. In the Earth, because of heat and pressure. Diamond that is close to the surface can be mined. They become diamond in the rough. They're taken out of the earth and they're crafted as diamond rings. So what if we were to rewind the cosmic clock further back in time? We see the diamond ring becoming diamond in the rough, the film running in reverse, becoming diamond encrusted in the earth, and before that, the formation of the earth, of the planet, formation of the solar system, and eventually to the beginning of the universe. Can we go back even further than that? What about the multiverse, string theory? Well, no one really knows for sure. And this idea of something coming from nothing is what happens at the subatomic level as well. Virtual particles and antiparticles spontaneously emerge for a brief instant before annihilating each other because of quantum fluctuation. We cannot perceive it with our senses, but we can definitely detect using experiments. It is happening everywhere, all the time. So these virtual particles are the somethingness that is emerging from nothingness all the time. And at a more down-to-earth personal level, this is also happening with what we create. Think about our inventions. At first, they don't exist. Then they do. The invention started out as an idea, a formless thought in the mind that eventually becomes an object of substance. So, with all of these in mind, we can summarize in our illustration. We use our senses to observe all living things and all people as well. Then we use our mind, the reasoning ability, to trace the biological lineage back in time. Then we realize there must be an ultimate point of origin that is the source of life. Therefore, even if we cannot see the Tao directly, we can still tell that within the Tao there is something, the potential for life, waiting for the right time to come into the world. We also use our senses to observe material things, all of our creations and inventions. And most everything that we see around us fit into this category. We tap into our reasoning ability again to trace them back in time to the point of origin. How did they come into being? How were they created? And as I mentioned in the previous slide, we quickly get to the point where such things existed only as an idea. Now we go back even further, and even the idea for the invention at some point did not exist as of yet. All there was simply pure potentiality. This again takes us to the Tao, the infinite field of endless possibilities. We draw from the creative energy of the living void to bring something out of nothing. Of course, the raw material that we use to create something, it pre-existed. But what we're really good at is taking an idea to shape the raw material into something new. This is reflective of universal creation. In ancient times, it used to be an unquestioned teaching that creation was a divine power, the sole province of the gods. So just by coming up with an original idea of your own and make it happen, make it real in your life, that is the proof that you possess the divine power of creation as well. You prove the existence of this divine spark within yourself. So we can add within the Tao, there is substance. Line 9, so deep, so profound. So we have a couple of key characters here. As I mentioned, xi, the two repeating characters, that is the exclamation, the emphasis, o or a. And the first and third characters are synonymous with one another. deep, great depth, profound. This is the only line in the Tao Te Ching that uses two characters of similar meaning and associated each one with exclamation. This is the most emphasis of all passages in the Tao Te Ching, signifying its importance. The great depth of the Tao means there will always be more to learn. Indeed, the more you learn about the Tao, the more you realize is out there. This is the reason why real masters never consider themselves as masters. The more they understand, the more they realize there's so much that they don't know. Imagine what you know about the Tao as a circle. The circle contains all the concepts and ideas you have studied and understood. So I call it the circle of knowledge. Outside the circle of knowledge is the unknown. All things related to the Tao that you don't know about as of yet. At the circumference or the edge, the outer edge of the circle, you have new concepts and ideas and refinements, different perspectives on old concepts that you are aware of but have not yet mastered. These are the subjects of learning. The more you learn, the more you push back the frontier of knowledge, and therefore your circle expands. It gets bigger and it contains more and more. Whatever knowledge within the circle that you actually use and apply to life transform to wisdom, and they can become a part of you. But here's the thing. As the circle expands, so too does the length of the circumference or the outer edge. It is getting longer and longer. And that is because when you learn one thing, you find out from that one thing that there's two other things. Each additional thing that you learn leads to discovery of more things. You are humbled by the knowledge that you have yet to acquire. And it becomes even more humbling as time goes on, because the circle of knowledge keeps getting bigger and bigger, so the outer edge keeps getting longer and longer. Line 10. Within there is essence. In addition to images and substance, there is also essence within the Tao. What is essence? What does Lao Tzu mean by that? Essence in this context denotes two categories. 精力, that is, energy, force, vigor, vitality. 精神, spirit, spirituality, awareness, sentience. Both of these are reflected in you at the personal level. You certainly can feel the energy that you possess. Sometimes you have more, sometimes you have less. You certainly can feel your own spirit, your awareness, your sentience. These are what philosophers would call self-evident. The essence of energy is the vitality that drives life forward. And the essence of spirituality is marked by expanded awareness. The more of that essence you refine, the more aware you become as a person. So, with this understanding, we're in a position to add the third factor into our illustration, into our framework. So again, we start from the left-hand side. Using our senses to observe all living things, including people, we can see manifestations of energy, force, vigor, vitality. We see how, time and time again, life finds a way to move forward. And sometimes, life finds a way that is unexpected or surprising. For instance, plants and animals adapt to survive in deserts. The cactus, for example, can thrive with very little water. It's not just plants and animals. It is just as true for humans as it is for animals. Human history is full of stories of people winning against long odds, people moving to an unfamiliar environment, and despite the challenges against them, succeed in building a good life for themselves. Therefore, the Tao Te Ching describes life as flexible, soft, pliant. Life is driven to explore and grow. There is some sort of life force behind this vitality of living things. And using our senses to observe and our feelings to sense, we can also get to the point of the other category, the second category of essence, which is spirit, spirituality, awareness, sentience. When we look around in society, look around us, we can definitely see the difference between people who are just going through the motions, living day to day, and those who live with meaning. They're very different because they know where they are going. You can see it in their eyes. They're motivated by this inner purpose. We can also see the degree of awareness that people have. We have all seen people who are completely oblivious, totally lacking in self-awareness. They may be, for instance, critical of others while unaware that they have the same fault or even greater fault. Others, intelligent, aware, they are obviously much more self-aware. They are aware of where they are, the environment. They are aware of others, sensitive to the needs of the people around them. So just by looking around at people, we observe different levels of awareness. This is what brings us to seeing that there's essence within the Tao. All human beings have the potential, even if they start out oblivious, not self-aware, they have the potential to awaken into a higher level of awareness, the potential for greater sentience. So in Buddhism, it is called Buddha nature, and the Buddhist term for people is sentient beings. So sentience is something that we can sense within the Tao, even if we cannot see the Tao directly. Line 11. Its essence is supremely real. So the essence that we have just spoken of, we can see it, we can observe it. There's also the essence of the Tao. It's real because reality has a way about it, and the way is the Tao. What is the way of reality? There are some things we can see. We know consciousness exists. We are self-aware. We know, therefore we are, which is just the extended form of I think, therefore I am. So consciousness exists. It's one characteristic of this reality. Another characteristic is constant change. The only constant in this existence is change itself. There's also connectedness, which is not as obvious. Consciousness, we can feel the evidence of it every moment. Constant change, we can see it happening all around us. Connectedness, talking about separation, it's a surface level illusion. Sometimes that's all we see. But everything is part of a vast web of relationships and connections. There are no truly separate, isolated entities. All are connected. You and I are connected at a fundamental level of reality. This meeting is evidence that you and I have a closer connection than most. It is what brought us together. This is the connection that I cherish and honor, a connection we all share. So I would make this statement: these are undeniably real, despite the doubt being indistinct and unclear. And I would extend that to everybody in this meeting as well. The essence of people, of an individual, is the same Tao as the essence of the Tao. I say that because everyone has a way about him or her. We acknowledge this every time we say something like, oh, that's just the way he is. Or, that is her way. Way is the Tao. The way you are, your Tao, depends on your nature. You have it. It's not optional. Just like you cannot choose to not have height and weight. Height and weight are attributes that come with physical existence. Since you exist, you've got both height and weight. Not optional. Your way is synonymous with your Tao. So by extension, we say everyone has the Tao. Everyone is the Tao. Of course, what people choose to do with the Tao in themselves can vary greatly. But there's no denying the potential exists. It is exactly as I just mentioned about the Buddha nature, the potential to attain Buddhahood in Buddhism. It's just a different way to express the same concept. And we come to line 12. Within it, there is faith. 信 is the character. This character means faith, trust, belief, confidence. This line is the key concept and conclusion to this entire section. From observation and reasoning, we can comprehend the reality of the Tao. There is much more to talk about, but we are getting close to the top of the hour now, so we have to stop here and pick it up again next time. For now, let me summarize what we have talked about today. This is the first part of the summary that we looked at previously. When we looked at it, we only talked about number 1. You being a manifestation of the Tao, therefore reflecting the characteristics of the Tao in your essence. Your awareness, your intelligence, your sentience, those are reflections of universal intelligence of the Tao. Today, we added to that discussion by speaking of the patterns of your life. So, having heard that description of samsara, as well as the circular exchanges of karmic energy, I would invite you to look for circular exchanges of karma in your own life. With everything that happens, think about cause and effect. Think about what might have been the seed that was planted previously. And also, with every action that you take, consider what sort of cause are you enacting that would eventually be coming back as an effect. This will help you perceive the many cycles in life. And reflecting on your life, I would also invite you to look at the cycles in your life history so far. What are the seasons of your life? What has transpired already? What is the season of your life now? And what are you transitioning to? I think you will find those questions interesting to contemplate. And number 3, we talked about creativity, to bring something into the world from nothing. Like the Tao, you have that power. Power attributed to the divine, to the gods. You have this divine power to bring things into reality, to create. So recognize that and maximize your creative flow. The moment you tap into it, you'll know when you succeed in tapping into the creativity that is a vast potential within you, because that is when all these ideas come out and there's no stopping the flow. Then the question is, what would you decide to manifest or create next? What is your next creation? What is the next expression of your creativity? I would even take another step back and say, as a smaller act of creation, create a plan for doing so. Create a plan to manifest or create something. As you get involved with the creative process, the more you do it, the better you get at it, the more you are able to tap into the vast powers of the Tao. Share the Tao. The easiest way to access Tao resources is to visit my author website, dereklin.com. There, you can click on links and go to the webpage where you will find everything listed, such as Taoism.net, with information about the Tao and also about this meeting. Our Facebook community, where you can ask questions or discuss your thoughts on the Tao with others. Our YouTube channel, where you can watch recordings of all our previous meetings. My Amazon author page, where you can find books and audiobooks for your continuing exploration. You can also go directly with the web address, dereklin.com/links, as you can see. You can use these resources to share the Tao with the people you know who may be interested. When you see the benefits of Tao cultivation in your life, you can share your experience with others through your comments in Facebook or YouTube. If you find my books or audiobooks to be helpful, you can post your reviews on Amazon to help others discover the Tao. This is the path that I am on, so I can say sharing the Tao has benefited me personally in every aspect of life. I would like to invite you to come along with me to share the Tao. Let us travel together on the path in the journey of life. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.